This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. The podcast features conversation for musicians of all types and genres, a curation of expertise intended to help all musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love, make music. Hello, curious little birdies. It's Robonzo. This episode of the Unstarving Musicians Podcast features a conversation with Bree Noble. We were introduced by super connector D. Grant Smith of Appetizer radio show fame, and man, am I thankful for the introduction. I'm going to use a phrase that gets overused by a good friend, and that phrase is value bombs. Couldn't help myself because that's what Bree does. She's a value bomber. I just made that one up, and it feels so right. Bree is an advocate for female music entrepreneurs. After enjoying an indie career of her own filled with life lessons, she decided to help others by creating an online radio station, which also now includes a companion podcast for female music artists. And she's created a community and education platform devoted to, you guessed it, female music entrepreneurs. Although she did let me sneak into one of her online courses recently. I wasn't all that sneaky though. She saw me come in and assumed I was doing some research. I was, but the content did look pretty darn compelling. Anyway, we talk about her radio station, podcasts, plural, podcasting, house concerts, doing your thing with or without a band, business, marketing, performance venues uniquely for women, and much, much more. Man or woman, this episode is filled with tons of useful stuff. Check it out, enjoy, and you're welcome. Without further ado, please enjoy my chat with indie artist turned educator, Bree Noble. Bree, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And I am excited to have you. I know you're having a day wrought with technology challenges, so let's see how this goes. And I want you not to worry because I understand how that goes.
Got it. I will try not to worry.
So first of all, where are you located?
I am located in Oakhurst, California, which is about 20 minutes outside the south gate of Yosemite National Park. So beautiful, woodsy mountain area.
I was watching one of your Facebook Live broadcasts this morning, as a matter of fact, and I gathered that you were in a rural area. So we have something to commiserate on should technology not go our way. I'm actually in a rural tropical area in Panama in Central America.
Oh, wow. Well, Yeah, it's a challenge when you live in an area where the best internet is not necessarily available.
Yeah. It's been, knock on wood, it's been pretty good, and my techie challenges have often been self-imposed, but things happening not so much with the internet. And another kind of question related to where you are, I'm curious, and today's a little bit of a learning episode for me as well, because we recently met. We were introduced by D. Grant Smith, a mutual friend, but I wanted to know, where did you grow up?
I was born and grew up a lot of my younger years in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then I moved to a town about 2 hours away called Modesto.
Okay. I know of Modesto. I've actually
Flat farming area. Oh, gosh.
I think we had one of those moments. So you grew up or you moved out to Modesto, but started out in the San Francisco Bay Area. I got that. How long were you in Modesto as a young person?
I was in Modesto from maybe 8th grade through the end of high school, and then I went to college in Santa Barbara.
Ah, that's a lovely area.
Yes, totally different from Modesto. Beautiful beaches and
to put it mildly.
A lot of rich people.
Yeah, that's funny. So I spent 17 years in the South San Francisco Bay Area. Was that like really early years you were there, or do you have some memories from there, or have you spent some time as an adult there?
Oh, absolutely. I lived there until after 7th grade. So I was born in Redwood City. I lived most of the time in Redwood City and Woodside area.
Those are really nice areas.
Yeah, I lived on the peninsula probably through 7th grade. That's where my parents met and grew up and all that stuff. And so I was around a lot of family. But then we moved to Modesto in my 8th grade year, and we lived there. I lived there through high school. And then I ended up moving to Santa Barbara, gorgeous area, totally different from Modesto, for college.
Okay. And what was your degree in?
My degree, I had a double degree in music, vocal performance, and then business, basically focusing on accounting and management.
That probably lent itself well into the business of women of substance and the femmusician.com era of your life, I would imagine.
Yep, just a little bit.
Do you also, I have not made a time to dig into your indie career. Are you also a player of instruments as well?
Yeah, so I'm mostly a vocalist and songwriter, but I do play keyboard, and that's basically my instrument of choice is piano.
And you know what? I did see a picture of you with a keyboard, so I did know you played something after all, but cool. That's very cool. And what's the time frame of your personal music journey before you got into helping other women artists?
So, I mean, when I was in college, I, did the typical like opera scenes in college and starting to perform out, as classically trained. And I was also in one of the school's performing ensembles that did more like contemporary music with a band plus a cappella music, kind of like, pentatonics or something. Mm-hmm. And, we toured all around. So when I left school, I really wanted to do that as a full-time career, but I had absolutely no clue how to start. And so, of course, I fell back on my business stuff because I had kind of gotten into the business area as a fallback, like, just in case I don't figure out this music thing, I need something. And so I had just gotten married, and so I was very glad that I had the business side that I could fall back on and get a job and support us. My husband was getting his doctorate, and so, I needed to be the major breadwinner at that point. And so I worked as an accountant for several years, and then I got a job working as the director of finance at an opera company, which was cool because I got to experience working in the music field, even if I wasn't performing for them, and got to sit in the front at all the fancy opening nights and go to all the fancy galas and everything. And so I did that for, 5 years. I was working there at full time as the director of finance. All along that time, I really was trying to start a music career for myself on the side, and I was involved in a lot of different bands, and how many bands sometimes you have to be in until you find one that fits. And I just never found that one that fit me. And I always thought, well, I can't do this on my own. I need to have a band. I need to fit into someone else's puzzle, or I need them to figure out how I'm going to make it because I don't know how. And finally, just out of frustration, I decided, I need to go start my own band. So I started my own band. We were performing local while I was still working at the opera. And then I ended up quitting the opera because I had kids and I wanted to, be home with them more. And the job was pretty stressful, but I ended up working there still part-time. And so I had more time for music, and so I decided I was going to, take this band and expand it more, but it turned out all the players had full-time jobs, and they didn't want to tour, and they really couldn't tour. So at that point, I just said, you know what, I've got to figure this thing out on my own. I've got to be able to be a solo artist. I can actually go out and do things. And that is when I finally got the courage, almost more out of frustration and not knowing what else to do, to go out on my own and try to figure out all the other stuff, like how am I going to promote myself and how am I going to build an audience. And even though I had all translate over into me being an artist, which is kind of crazy that I think about that now, but I wasn't running, my artist career like a business. And had I done that, had I realized, you've got to figure out how to do marketing, you've got to figure out, how you're going to make income and think of yourself as a business, I would have been able to do what I did.
Did I understand you right that you were sitting on some knowledge and experience from the opera while you're scratching your head, or stressing, maybe a little bit's the better word, stressing about, wow, I got to figure out how to do this and market myself. And was it that a light bulb went off that, oh, wait, I have some of this stuff, I learned a while back I could use?
I don't think it actually happened that way. I mean, I don't think what I learned at the opera necessarily could different thing. They had a completely different lifestyle of going from opera company to opera company. But I think just having the knowledge of that I learned in school of how to manage yourself, how to be a manager, how to think strategically as an entrepreneur. I took an entrepreneurial class in school, and somehow the light bulb didn't go off there until I started watching other artists. I started looking into what they were doing on a daily basis to actually, have a career that was sustainable. And I started networking with them and getting to know them and asking a lot of questions. And that is when the light bulb went off. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Some of the stuff I learned in school could apply to me as a musician. Why didn't I think of that?
Do you recall the first person or two that inspired you to have the change in mindset, those artists that you referenced?
Absolutely. I mean, I was sitting in at a group called MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, and I was there because I had a little baby, and the baby was being babysat, so I could, get to know some other moms and watch a program. And somebody came and performed there and did like exactly what I wanted to do. She told stories, she performed her own songs, and afterward I talked to her group that she was in of other female independent artists that were doing similar stuff. And that was when I really started to dig in and be like, oh, there are really people out there doing exactly what I want. All I need to do is see what they're doing and try to follow what they're doing, and find people that are a little bit ahead of me and ask a lot of questions and emulate.
Yeah, that's interesting. And was that a totally non-music related gathering that you were at? There just happened to be a performer there, or was there some music related reason that you were there?
Oh, no, it was totally non-music related. It was just like another mom invited me, and it's just a group for moms to get together. And I ended up, after figuring all this stuff out and creating my own career and booking tours and stuff, I ended up performing at a ton of those kinds of groups in California because I thought, if I was there and I loved the program, there's other people that would like this too.
Are you telling me there's a moms of preschoolers circuit for touring?
Absolutely there is. And I was
amazing.
on it. I was in like every single one in California and Oregon.
That's amazing. So were those fairly sizable events, the mothers events in terms of attendance, or were they kind of small groups, but there was this performing circuit that had emerged for musicians?
They were, depending on where they were, they could be as large as 200 people and as small as 30 people.
Okay.
So it's all over the map, but it's Mothers of Preschoolers is a national organization.
Okay, wow. So I don't know if when this was, if Meetup was around, but it's like a good Meetup was happening that you were touring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that is so interesting. So you eventually moved to, I'm guessing, well, tell me if I have this right. I can relate to the story in my own life. The players are somewhat different, but you found some success as an independent artist and learned how to do a lot of good stuff for yourself to enable yourself to perform, record, I imagine. And then you came to realize there were a lot of other female artists who you found to be extremely talented, but were having either exposure or just sort of like challenges with some of the things that early on challenged you for getting themselves out there. Is that kind of what led you into the Women of Substance Radio and things like femmusician.com?
Yeah, that's a pretty good synopsis of what happened. I mean, as being a touring independent female artist, I discovered that there were so many other great female artists and wondered why we weren't getting that representation like on the radio, or people just weren't knowing about all these great artists. And so while I was an independent touring artist, I decided to create Women of Substance Radio just as a place to aggregate that great music by female artists and give them a platform. And it really caught on. This started in 2007, and it grew slowly. It was totally a passion project, a hobby that I did on the side. I was still working part-time at the opera. I had little kids, and I was touring. So it wasn't really running it like a business at that point, just like a hobby that broke even. And so as it grew into, being a professional station with advertising and all that stuff. And at some point, around the time that I moved here to near Yosemite, I decided that I just didn't want to tour anymore. And I wanted to spend more time with my kids in their elementary years. And because I remember it very specifically, like I released a Christmas album in 2011, And I ended up being gone for 2 weeks right during the Christmas season because I needed to tour to promote the album and make back all the money I spent on it. And I missed so much. Like my kids were saying, you're missing the gingerbread house building and you're missing when I'm in this play. And, and it was just really hard to do that anymore because these years are, so short. So I decided, how can I, beyond even growing Women of Substance even more, what else can I do? And so I ended up adding a podcast to Women of Substance, as well as then creating the Female Entrepreneur Musician, because I had found that with working with all these women, thousands of women on the radio station, there were a lot that had been like me, like how I was. Didn't have a clue how to get started, needed a community, needed a mentor. And so that's what I wanted to do for them. And I started out with the podcast interviewing artists that had had some form of success as an independent and giving inspiration and advice. And then I moved from there to creating an online community called the Female Musician Academy in 2015. And within the academy, I've created several different courses. And so now I've got individual courses or the academy that you can join if you want to be involved in all the courses and get more personalized coaching. And so it's just been an amazing experience to help these artists. I don't want anyone to suffer like I did and being clueless for like literally 10 years trying to build this career on the side and not even knowing where to start.
Well, as I have learned, it certainly helps to surround yourself with people who've done it or experienced some of those things and who are inspired like you are to create learning platforms and communities. Women of Substance Radio, so about 660 episodes, or maybe exactly 660 episodes now. So it started out as streaming radio, right? And then you added a podcast. Does the streaming radio part still exist?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
The streaming radio was created originally first because podcasts were not that popular and people didn't know what they were. People know the word radio. So I created that. But what I was trying to do with the streaming radio is put the independent artists alongside popular, well-known artists to show that their music holds up. And so, you would hear Joni Mitchell and then you'd hear an independent. And I wanted to create this place where you could not only hear songs that you love by female artists you already know, but you could also discover new ones. And then I released the podcast as a way to just focus on the independents.
Well, I was listening to, I believe, episode 660, and I had listened to one when we were first introduced, which may be a couple of months back now, but I was pretty impressed with the curation that you had going on there. So what I was listening to, I wouldn't hear the side-by-side thing, but if I went to the radio, I would hear the side-by-side, meaning the independent artist as well. Okay, that's really cool. I think it's a great idea. I assumed that was part of the podcast too, but I think it's a really cool idea. So the Female Entrepreneur Musician emerged, and first thing that caught my eye, I'm sure you'll be happy to know, is 19 proven sources of income for female musicians you probably haven't considered.
Mm-hmm.
What, if you want, you can talk about as many of them as you want, but I didn't know if that would feel like putting you on the spot, but what are a couple of your favorite channels for income for female artists that they might not have thought about?
Sure. So I think, for female artists, there's actually some that are specifically for female that nobody thinks of as much. And number one is what we were talking about earlier, things like moms groups that are specifically for women, that reach out to women, that gather women in one place. There's things like National Federation of Women's groups that, I was a staple at all of the ones in my area. And I lived in Southern California, so there were tons of them, there's one in every city. And you can fill your whole calendar with that if you go to each one once a year. There are, seniors groups. A lot of the students that I work with are really enjoying getting involved in performing at senior centers, senior groups, maybe homes for older people. And a lot of these places actually have budget spend, especially the senior centers that are related to a city. Like they might get a budget from the city for entertainment. And so they do have budgets to spend. They are looking for programs. The same thing with the women's organizations. Like, they have to have a program every month. They're looking for you.
Yeah.
So, it's all about getting your name out there. The more you perform, the more people see you, the more referrals you get. And I remember the month where I never had to call out once. I just got enough referrals to fill my whole calendar. And at that point, I'm like, now I finally have a real career. And that can only happen, that snowball effect can only happen by actually getting out there and performing and having flyers and things people can take home to recommend you to other people. There are people at these events that I can guarantee are in charge or know someone in charge of other events, nonprofit organizations that need programs, community organizations, churches, all kinds of things.
And when you talk about programs, are you referring to entertainment in this case, or are you also referring to they have programs that they might need assistance with in assembling those types of things where they're bringing in entertainers or whatever?
An entertainment program.
Mm-hmm.
But what I always recommend is have an actual program. Like, don't just say, I'm a singer-songwriter and I want to come sing for your group. Like, what's really cool is if you can say, like, I have this program, it's called this, and it focuses around this, and I tell stories and sing songs around this subject.
What a great idea.
So we all should have a Christmas program for number one, because all these places are looking for new people to bring in during the holiday season. You could have a patriotic program if you're in the U.S. You can have a Mother's Day kind of program. That's another thing that's great for women. I can't tell you how many Mother's Day teas I've performed at over the years.
That's fantastic. I have to tell you something as a point of musician frustration for me. Now, you would probably categorize me in the hobby musician. I always call myself the weekend warrior semi-pro. Since I moved, so I've been in Panama for a year, so I haven't been gigging, but I was gigging solidly as much as I wanted, where I wanted pretty much, and with whom I wanted for a number of years, and ending that in the San Francisco Bay Area. But for somehow every holiday season, no Christmas songs, and I guess I just, should have pushed harder. But anyone who's listening to this that jams with me in the future, we learned some Christmas tunes, I'm going to be really happy.
Yeah, no, it's good. And I did a whole podcast episode on the female entrepreneur musician about why I think everyone should have a Christmas CD.
Yeah, and at the very least, if you're a performing act during the holiday season to play some flavor of holiday tunes, I think is just...
Yep.
Everybody loves it. So does Female Entrepreneur Musician have its own podcast as well, you said?
It does. So it's we are actually on episode, I think, 105 now. We were at first just doing interviews every week, and we have a Facebook Live show every Wednesday called the Indie Interactive. And so that's also comes out on the podcast on Thursdays. And then every other Monday we've got interviews.
That's cool. Do you have host help for this, like co-hosts, or are you doing it all?
Oh, no, I probably should. I do all the interviews myself. I actually really love doing the interviews. And then the weekly Indie Interactive, I'd say once a month or every other week, I bring on a co-host that's talking about a particular subject.
Okay. You are queen of time management, clearly.
Hey, that's one of my things. I actually have a whole course on that. So yes, absolutely. You have to if you want to do all the things and that's the thing with being entrepreneurs or creatives. Like, we have so many ideas. If we want to do as many as possible, we have to be a good time management person, but we also have to be okay with sacrificing some of those ideas if we actually want some of them to happen. Because if we try to do all of them, we'll do all of them half-baked and nothing will actually happen.
Or do almost none of them, right?
Right.
Well, I have to tell you, when I started this podcast, I wanted it to be interview format, and I've really enjoyed, talking to people like you and learning from the different guests that I have, but also learning the craft of asking good questions has been a big thrill for me, so I can relate to your enjoyment of that. I'm amazed that you're managing both of these. You know what? I want to ask you a podcasting question. Maybe
sure.
Maybe some of my listeners want to be or would be or are podcasters, but it looks like you have one or both of them also on TuneIn Radio and SoundCloud, or is TuneIn for the streaming part of WOS radio only, and then SoundCloud is for podcasting, or both?
So I believe I have, WOS is on TuneIn for both the streaming and for the podcast itself.
Okay.
I actually don't think that Female Entrepreneur Musician is on TuneIn. I probably should do that. Both of them are on Stitcher for Android. They're obviously on iTunes.
Okay.
I used to be on SoundCloud, but there's, a little bit of gloom and doom around SoundCloud right now, so I haven't really been focusing on that.
They're the ones. I heard my podcast host Libsyn was not naming names, but they kept talking about someone who was about to go out of business. Yes. Is that the word on the street?
Yes, that is the word on the street. Several offices closing. It's been coming for a while. I don't know if it's going to actually happen, but it's one of those snowball effects again. Like you hear bad news and then everybody jumps ship. And, I never hosted with SoundCloud because I knew that I wanted to go with someone like Libsyn that was a lot more established.
Well, that's too bad. All the years that SoundCloud's been around, and hopefully something good happens, like, sure that maybe they're not going to survive in their current form, but maybe someone will pick up the technology and keep it going. But I have only very recently started perusing it, I guess. And in fact, I immediately went from your site to just, hear the same content on SoundCloud, and then it led me to dive into another artist's work there. So that's too bad. Hopefully they make it. So then TuneIn. I think this is the last podcast question maybe, but how do you like the performance in terms of listenership that you've gotten for the podcast with TuneIn?
I haven't actually checked that much. I will tell you that radio-wise, I see some very good numbers from TuneIn because, with an online radio station, it's hard for people to discover you. Like we used to be on Live 365 and then, they just didn't have all the features that I wanted for the advertising platform. And so we went totally independent. And so, people only find you if they know about you, if they see something online, or if they, an artist that they like is on the station. That's how they discover you. But TuneIn allows a way for people to discover us. And same thing with like iHeartRadio. People can discover us there. And then if they want to come and listen to us at womenofsubstanceradio.com directly, they can. Okay,
cool. Nice to learn about those things. I perhaps will investigate them myself. We're currently on, on the website, of course, and then Libsyn, of course, because I mentioned them as a host, and then iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And there was at least one other channel I was planning to publish to, but I hadn't really given thought to. I didn't even realize TuneIn was podcast hosting. Makes perfect sense, and yeah, it's very educational stuff. So one of the benefits of talking to nice people like you. I really want to ask you about house concerts. Are they still a thing for your tribe, your students, for other musicians?
They are. I mean, I love house concerts. I think they're one of the best ways for independent artists to make money and actually really develop great relationships with their fans. And I have a course called Profitable House Concerts, and it just goes through, step by step how to book them, how to market them, how to work with the hosts to make them the most successful, how to set them up on the day of, all that stuff, and then how to do the ask for the money. Mm-hmm. So I really think they're such a great way, and they're so fun. Like every one of my students, they're nervous about doing them, and then they do the first one and they're like, this is the most fun thing ever. I want to do these all the time.
I would think so, and I've never done one. I do have some friends who are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they have been hired several times by a couple of different clients in the San Francisco Bay Area to haul their fairly substantial show to California and get paid pretty well. Wow. I know that they've enjoyed it, but I have at the same time from one of the members, and he was sharing with me an episode that had occurred that was less than pleasant, and I was like, well, I guess, yeah, that kind of thing can happen when you're in someone's home, but I imagine that it's largely about setting expectations, though, so who knows?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I would recommend when you're starting out, definitely use hosts that you already know, so you can kind of go through any pitfalls that might happen to you with somebody that you're comfortable with.
I would think that, if I were doing it, I would do what you just said and would probably try my hardest to work by referral only because it does seem like a scary prospect to go into someone's home that you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely if you use something like Concerts in Your Home, they've got proven hosts that have, ratings and lots of experience, and you can ask other artists about them. That I think would be okay. Like just finding a random person online, I don't know about that.
Dang it, so
But I
there's a
also think
website for everything, isn't there?
there is. And I think bringing backup is always good. Like if you can go not only by yourself, I think that's always better.
Sure.
It's always better anyway because, getting help with setup, getting help with your merch table so you can actually talk to the fans and everything. I think that's always better. But if you can't, then I suggest you've got a host that you are comfortable with, at least for the first few times.
And while I'm sure that is a great rule of thumb for everyone, I would imagine it's even more so for female performers to have a buddy.
Yep, definitely.
That's cool. I was mentioning when we first started talking, I've not made time to dive into your music, which I assume you're doing less of because you're educating and podcasting, and stop me if I'm wrong, but who were your earliest music influences?
I mean, when I was younger, like Amy Grant and people like that, more on the positive, even the Christian side. Amy Grant, I think, was really pivotal because she showed that someone that does Christian music can cross over into the pop world and do positive music. So she was definitely one of my earlier role models. Later on, I would say, as I was a singer-songwriter, I was definitely influenced by people like Colby Calais, Sarah Bareilles, Sarah McLachlan was a big one for me.
Love her.
Yeah, just Gavin DeGraw, people like that. And not that I write like them, but, I would love to write like them, but it just never came out that way. But they're definitely influences for me.
Growing up, I started getting into music very heavily at a very young age, and I was very much a product for the probably first 10 years of what is now genred as classic rock, but so, things like the Rolling Stones and Hendrix and Cream and Aerosmith and ZZ Top, and then eventually the 80s music scene, the emerging, alternative rock got into my life, and there were a lot of things I hated back then that I love listening to now, but for anyone who doesn't know me, now just got a glimpse into my early music taste. When Amy Grant came out, somehow I liked her. I really did.
That's awesome.
But, I think MTV helped a little bit with that too, because if I recall, she was on music videos a lot. Yeah, I did like her. I like a lot of those others you mentioned too. That's pretty funny. We have some similar tastes. Are you still it looks like you have done some live events. Are you doing them? Am I correct? You've done some in the past, and are you still doing them? And by live events, I mean more for your WOS audience and your female musician entrepreneur audience.
I have not done any live events for female entrepreneur musician. I've talked with my Academy members of trying to set something up maybe in 2018 because I just think it's so powerful to actually get to meet in person. I know that many of my Academy members have tried very hard to meet in person, and it's been such an amazing experience for them when they were able to do it and even make music together. But for Women of Substance, we did a few showcases when I was in LA. I haven't really done anything since I moved up here because we're just too remote. I mean, I could do something in the Central Valley, but it's just much easier to do it in a place like LA. But we did 3 showcases of independent female artists, and we took submissions and chose the best ones, and they were really, really good. I mean, we had just a set of amazing artists, and I just sat there watching in awe, like, I created this thing. Like, I pulled these people together, I found all these talented ladies, and now I'm able to promote them. Like, I was just loving it.
That's cool.
I wish I could do more.
That's very cool. Can you go back to and tell me again, you were talking about the type of artists that you got. Can you repeat that?
Well, I tried to get a diverse set of artists. So I would say I had everything from like an Americana kind of band to a very, just solo acoustic singer-songwriter to somebody that was like, she was a kind of more alternative style, but she was based with her keyboard. So she was just like, I mean, when she played, it was like she was one with her keyboard. It was amazing. And I'm trying to think of who else was on that bill, but just everyone from people that ended up being on American Idol to people that are just some of the best like folk artists around that are, playing the LA scene all the time.
And that event, I take it, was marketed to your existing tribe and then probably marketed to those that were likely to also be part of that in the future?
Yes, for sure. And I mean, I don't know why it is, but it is really hard to get people out to events, even in LA, because I guess there's just so much going on and
That's exactly
people don't
why.
want to deal with the traffic and, but I mean, we had a good turnout for our last one, but I certainly would not have wanted the pressure of filling a huge room.
Sure.
Actually, the last one we did, I wasn't even there. We did one in San Diego, and somebody spearheaded it for me. We had about 75 people there, which was great, and everybody loved it. We did one in Chicago that another promoter spearheaded for me since I couldn't be there, and that one went really, really well, too. So, I mean, I'm always happy to promote gatherings of our artists. I can't necessarily be going across the country for these events.
Sure.
Because usually, it's not like they're making a ton of money that they can pay for my travel. But if anybody, really wants to start something up like that and use our platform, I'm all for it.
Well, I may talk to you about that in the future. I think it's a cool, a cool idea. And,
Women of Substance Panama.
Exactly. I was thinking about you and some of the artists you promote because there's a festival that happens in Panama. And it's called the world's biggest little festival, or the biggest little festival in the world. It's in a town called Boquete, which is a mountain community that grows some incredible coffee. And I think they're going into their fourth year. They're going into a new, bigger venue. So it's the Boquete Jazz and Blues Festival. But they're getting some really top-notch talent, some of it known and some of it new. But I will... if you're interested, I will send you info on the episode just so you can kind of hear a little bit about what it's about. And I think it would be a cool place to see some of your artists come. I know I think it started originally as a jazz festival, and he's expanded it to a jazz and blues festival. And I kind of think he's thinking of growing it to even more. But it's one of these musicians kind of festivals. He looks for people that are very flexible, easygoing, of course. There are a lot of jams that happen outside of the festival where some of the acts end up getting put together for some of the events at the festival, and then there are a lot of the artists that will perform with one another live at the festival. So it sounds very, very cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that's interesting. And those were both paid events that you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Very cool. On the marketing and business front, I'm going to back up. Our conversation kind of started there. I know I'm going to ask you this question, and I know that first, many people I've asked, it ranges from, well, I'm not really involved on the business side. I do marketing, or it's just kind of hard pressed to think about this question on the fly. But probably for you, not so much, because you sort of opened with it, and you've spent so much time in educating others. So maybe I have a sort of a twofold way to ask it. But the question is, on the marketing and business front, are there lessons or mistakes that you learned along the way that you share on a regular basis, or you'd like to share with listeners here that would be of value?
I mean, I would say that, as a musician, like there was tons of things I did wrong, and I share those all the time with my students and with people that I think can benefit from them, because many of them are probably making those mistakes. One big one was I thought that I had to have a band to perform. And it held me back for so long. Like, number one, I was trying to find a band because I wanted them to figure out all the stuff about how I was going to promote, and I didn't feel comfortable promoting myself and all that stuff. And number two, like, I did not feel comfortable playing just me and a keyboard on stage. Like, I had never had to do that. And so I was not the best keyboard player in the world. I didn't think that I could hold it up just myself. And finally, just out of frustration, I'm like, I have to be able to do this. I have to be able to be a solo artist. And so I just put my head down and practiced all my songs every day for like 2 hours for a month. And my poor children had to listen to it over and over again. But at the end of that month, I felt comfortable, and I said, I'm good enough right now that I can start booking myself. I may not be the best that I'm going to be. And maybe by the time the things that I book, which are usually about 2 months out from when you start booking, then I'll be even better and I'll be even more confident. But I remember the first performance that I did on that kind of mini tour when I had released my CD and I had just started playing for myself. Man, was I nervous. And, I even used a few tracks in some cases because I wasn't ready on some of the songs. But it was fine. Like, people still loved it. And so I had this stigma all this time that I couldn't do it unless I had a band. And when it finally was put in front of me that, like, no, you can't do it if you have a band, because this band cannot tour. And this band cannot play during the day because they all work. And so at that point, I'm like, that's it. I'm figuring this out. And so I actually released a podcast episode about that called So You Think You Need a Band. And it was one of my most popular episodes. I got a lot of comments on that and a lot of people that said, oh my gosh, that encouraged me so much. This has been holding me back and I'm finally just going to, put my head down and practice and feel okay with at least some of my songs so I can get out there, because I've been sitting at home keeping my music to myself because I didn't think I could do it without a band.
Yeah. So I've wanted to mention a young guy that I interviewed just last night. He'll be on episode 16. So this is the second time I was thinking of him in our conversation. His name is Bill Lanero, and he is it's basically a metal band. They've kind of been coined a new genre called guitar chords and instrumental. But he had made a comment, two things, and he's not the first to say it on this show, but having confidence and not sure if these two different people had used the same word, faith, but basically confidence and faith in what you're doing. And if it's in your, if you're doing or playing or performing, writing things that are really coming from your heart, that the next thing you really do need is confidence that it's going to work. That's a huge part of it, he had said. And the other thing he said, which resonates a little bit with one of your comments here, was that a lot of musicians get frustrated with their ability to not be able to do something very specific. In this case, he was talking about, trying to learn something by another artist, that had influenced them. And he just suggested, well, why not go just practice the heck out of it until something that's your own style comes out of it. If you cannot master it, turn it into something of your own, which I think is kind of what you were saying that you did with the keyboards. You went and you practiced, you got what you felt was good enough. And I love that you were flying by the seat of your pants and booking 2 months out, knowing you were wanting to get a little bit better before those shows happened. But
yeah.
That's very cool.
It's interesting. Something else that held me back, I remember, is that I had an arranger and, another bunch of band members playing on my album. And so it sounded a certain way. Like the keyboard, I had not played the keyboard part for this one particular song. And so I had to play it exactly the way that this guy did. And like, if I didn't play it the way he did, then I'd be like an imposter and people would find me out that I couldn't play it because it was too hard. And finally one day I'm like, okay, unless someone's sitting here playing the CD while they're listening to me, which would never happen, they're not going to know that it's different. They're not going to remember when they listen to the CD. And even if they did, who cares? Because you can do something totally different live. And so once I finally realized that and thought, why don't I just simplify this so I can actually play it without screwing up, then I finally was broken out of those like chains of I need to sound exactly like the CD. And that was another podcast episode I did, like talking about you don't need to sound exactly like the CD. In fact, you shouldn't. Because if they wanted to hear the CD, they'd just put that on. What they want to hear is your own interpretation of what's on the CD live in front of them.
Sure. And I imagine that if you act as if, as the saying goes, that many people will just see it as that your interpretation.
Yep.
So I had another guest on here who might be of interest to you. Her name is Mira Godo. She's an emerging country artist in Nashville. And she had talked about, I asked her if she was planning to have a band for future touring. And she was talking about another record release, album release that she was working, writing for. And she told me, a little bit to my surprise, but I think, I've been in bands forever, but it made sense to me. She had said, I think, when I do the album, I'm going to hire some musicians. There's a gazillion studio musicians here who do outstanding work and have reasonable rates, and they love working with, other passionate songwriters. And then separately, I'll probably hire some people to perform with me. But I know that she's totally comfortable competent and capable of performing by herself too. She'll mix it up, and all the while maybe never having a band.
Right. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with having a band. What is wrong is being totally fettered by the fact that you don't have one.
Yeah.
I mean, having a band is awesome. Like when I was home and not touring, I would still play with the band that I had because they still wanted to play with me, even though they couldn't tour.
Sure.
So those would be special shows and they'd be extra fun. But I wasn't stuck without them.
Yeah, and I guess observing friends and with my own experience, having the flexibility to do, as you just described, to be able to perform on your own, or in my case, as a drummer vocalist, haven't been writing music, but to be able to perform with a 4-piece or a 5-piece, and then be able to perform other venues with a 3-piece of maybe different guys or one of the same other guys. It's a good flexibility to have. Taking it down to your world that you're talking about now, doing it as a solo artist and having a band for special occasions sounds great.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, Bree, thank you so much for making time for me and for helping us working with the technology challenges that we both faced this morning.
I'm glad it wasn't just me.
No, like I was telling you before we started recording, I've had some pretty crazy, silly self-inflicted things happen on the tech side. So where is the best place for people to find you online? I know you're all over the place, but...
I would definitely say femmusician.com. That's F as in female, E as in entrepreneur, musician.com. That's where they can find the podcast of the same name. Lots of great resources like the one you mentioned, the 19 sources of income that you probably haven't considered for your musician business. And lots of other, free trainings and other free checklists and resources, as well as I would love for any of you female artists to come join us in our Facebook group. We have a free Facebook community, 1,800 people in this group right now. And it's a really engaged, fun group of people from all over the world. And that you can find at woscommunity.com. That stands for Women of Substance, woscommunity.com. And then, of course, if you want to listen to the radio station, submit your music, that would be wosradio.com.
I snuck into one of your groups. Did you know that?
I did. I saw you. That was actually I'm doing a Facebook ads training right now, and I saw you snuck into my group yesterday, and I was like, oh, good. He's doing some research.
Yeah, I wanted to check out the quality of your work, and I thought, hey, maybe she's going to teach me something. This is great.
Then if you were watching today, you saw my technology issues. I've never been so pixelated in my life.
I think I saw, have you already done 2?
I did one yesterday.
I've been watching the one from yesterday, and you were
good. That one's a lot less. There's no...
Oh, maybe I saw today's then. There was plenty.
Oh, yikes.
But you know what? It was okay. It didn't take away from the content. And thanks for letting me in the group. I didn't... So, it's probably a good question. Maybe there's not a lot, but do you work with men as well?
I do, absolutely. That particular group, the Facebook ads, that is a course in itself. And it's a training in itself, and it's not specifically for women. Obviously, I don't let men into the Female Musician Academy. I created that as a safe haven for women where they can communicate with other women and create a community around that. But other than that, men are absolutely welcome to take my courses. I have a lot of men in my Profitable House Concerts course and in my my course on productivity. That's a popular one with guys. And every once in a while I'll get an email from a guy and they're like, I know you run femmusician.com. Is it okay if I'm following you? It's totally fine. I love everyone. It's not that I have anything against men. I just want to create something special for women. Now
all your female entrepreneurs in the other more restricted group are going to go, who is this guy? We got to watch out for him. Don't let him in.
Nah, we do let some men into the WOS community if they are part of a band that has a female lead singer, or if they are a promoter of a specific female artist and, they're a champion for female artists. Absolutely. We don't turn them away.
Well, that's very cool. All right, Bree, thank you so much. I hope that we get to do this again sometime in the future. It seems like there's a lot more ground to cover.
Yeah, this has been really great. And of course, thank you to D. Grant Smith for introducing us. He always introduced me to the most interesting people.
He's such a sweet guy. I'll have to ping him and let him know I appreciate it. All right. Have a great day, Bree.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Hey, this is Robonzo. Thanks so much for listening. Did you know I'm also an author? Check out my book, The Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs: How to Get Booked and Paid What You're Worth Over and Over Again, available on Amazon. And the book is also available in audio format as The Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. Check it out wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Last but not least, are you a gigging musician, recording artist, songwriter, or touring professional? Perhaps struggling to get your music out to the world? Struggling to get the gigs you want? Pop over to unstarvingmusician.com and sign up for my email list. I'll send you an occasional email with tips, expert advice, music, musician resources, and anything else I come across that might make your journey better and brighter. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.